911, what's your emergency?
The following content is graphic, emotional, and includes dark humor that may not be suitable for all listeners. Discretion is advised. These stories are based on real-life EMS, military, and healthcare experiences. Calls are real, providers are real, names and details have been changed to protect privacy. They may be disturbing to some and are definitely inappropriate for HR department. Any medical or mental health discussion is personal experience, not protocol. Use your damn brain. Follow your local guidelines, and when in doubt, call med control. If you're struggling, don't do it alone. Talk to someone, a coworker, a friend, a therapist, or hell, reach out to me. I'll answer. Need help right now? Text or call 988 or visit 988lifeline.org. All right, you're listening to Dispatch and Dysfunctional, where chaos meets compassion and the people who care for everyone else finally get to be seen. Today's guest has spent her whole life doing just that. Lynette Weldon is a nurse, educator, and advocate who's walked through burnout, rediscovered purpose, and now teaches others how to protect their energy while serving others. Her work focuses on the intersection of trauma, identity, and resilience, helping caregivers stop confusing sacrifice with strength. Lynette, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm not a nurse, but I feel like I should be.
Oh, I got you. Well, I got that wrong. I'm sorry.
We spent a lot of time in the hospitals, that's for sure.
I got you.
Yeah.
So I always tell people a bio that doesn't really tell the true story or the whole story. So for everyone meeting you for the first time, who is Lynette Weldon, and what's the one thing you hope listeners take away from this episode?
Who is Lynette Weldon? I have been a caregiver for over now 36 years of my life. And it started, I watched my mom care for my dad, who had a brain tumor, multiple operations, surgeries, chemo, radiation, lived in our living room for I don't know how long in a hospital bed. And so it started way back then. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I don't want to end up like that, watching everything that she went through. And then fast forward, and I have a daughter who was born with Down syndrome, hole in her heart, diagnosed with juvenile diabetes at 8 months old. She was the youngest one they had ever seen. I have a fear of needles, so I'm thinking, oh my God, how am I going to care for this child, right?
Yep.
And so that's when it started. And I also had a husband who suffered from addiction and severe depression.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I think in that situation, we all know about codependency, but I don't think that it's connected that you're also then a caregiver for that person and, in multiple ways. So I feel like I have a PhD and all of it. So that's me in a nutshell.
I got 36 years
Yeah.
as a caregiver. That's quite a long time.
Yeah.
And then now you've transitioned into helping others even further into caregiving as well.
Yeah, and I think that's my life's mission right now is just because there's so much stigma behind it with all the feelings and emotions that go into it, the guilt and the grieving and, all of that. And I think for most, if you are in a position of a caregiver, you already have that personality where you're going to give and give and give. And burnout is a real thing and it's dangerous. And one of the things I say to my clients right off the bat is if you continue the way you are, you're not going to be there for the long haul. Who's going to take care of the person that you love? Things have to shift, things have to change.
Very true.
Yeah.
So for all the listeners, picture this: the end of a 12-hour shift that turned into 14. Everything you wear to work, the badge, the scrubs, the mask, the uniform, feels heavier than you do. You've cared for 12 patients, charted on 10 more, and somewhere in between you forgot you haven't even eaten since sunrise. You've driven home on autopilot, park, and just sit, because going inside feels like another shift you don't have energy for. That's the moment. That's where Lynette's story starts. So Lynette, you talk openly about burning out and almost walking away from healthcare. What was the moment that made you say something has to change?
There were several, and it took several to really wake me up. But I think the biggest one was waking up one morning and feeling like, I just don't want to do this again. I don't know how I'm going to do this. And if I don't, who's going to be there for them? And just feeling so physically and emotionally depleted that I just didn't even care about me, you know. And then just the way when you're in that situation and you're feeling so overwhelmed and burnt out, your personality changes, you're snappy and you're not fully present. And just looking in the mirror and thinking, who the hell am I anymore? This is, something's got to give here. This is not good, you know? And I think that's one of the biggest signs is when, you don't even know who you are anymore. Nothing makes you happy. Nothing calms you down. You're exhausted. There's no joy left, is that's a huge red flag,
Very
you know? Yeah. And even for professionals, like I said, we spent a ton of time in the hospital when she was growing up. And I used to watch the nurses come in and out, and they're tired and they're exhausted. And, they're asked to, stay longer, do another shift, and people have to learn that the hardest thing I think is saying no, especially if you have that personality. And you have to learn how to say no, or your life is going to crash.
very true. And so you've said before, burnout sneaks up quietly. What are the
Yeah.
first red flags that caregivers ignore?
Um, there's several. I think in the beginning, most caregivers are thrown into this, right? They don't expect it to happen. They don't plan for it, and so they just put their head down and they power through. They just do what needs to be done, and then, the brain fog starts. They start to forget little things. They're not sleeping enough, or they think, I can do it later. I got to take care of this. I'll rest later. Um, you know, Not eating too much. There's so many red flags. I know that with a lot of women that I've worked with, they cope by eating, so then there's the extra pounds, or maybe a glass of wine turns into two and then a bottle, and just recognizing those little things. You have to start to really be aware, basically. I think we're conditioned to just shove emotions down and just power through. And you have to learn it's okay. It's okay to feel tired and ask for help. It's okay to be pissed off a little bit that everything's falling on you, you know, and just recognizing that those are normal is, I think, the first step.
Yes, ma'am. I agree. So, in your experience, why do so many nurses, medics, and responders treat exhaustion like a badge of honor?
Hmm. You know, I think we've been taught that. I think it's a belief system that needs to change. I think society looks at people who give and give and give as, that's a badge of honor. But if you look at it from a different perspective, it really isn't. You're not doing anybody any good when you're in that constant do more, give more, you know? I think that really comes from our belief system and from society, that the more you sacrifice, the better person you are.
And I agree with that too as well. And I think on the healthcare side of it is we do give our all to everybody, and when we're doing it, we don't
Mhm.
honestly realize that we're doing it because that's what we signed up for. That's
Mhm.
again my opinion. I'm not trained in that, but that's how I see it.
Yeah.
So, what's the difference between being committed to work and being consumed by it?
Mhm. And it's learning that you have to draw that line. If you're committed, then you need to take care of yourself. So you have to learn that if you don't take care of you, you're not very committed to doing a good job when you're there, because now you're exhausted and depleted and good for nobody. It's kind of like that analogy on the plane. They say it every single time you fly. When that mask drops, you put it on yourself first before you can save the person next to you. And it's true in all areas of life. If you don't take care of you, you can't take care of anyone else,
Very
you
true.
know. So somebody, for me, seeing somebody stand up and set some boundaries and saying, I just can't do that today and not even giving an explanation. We feel like we have to explain everything. I don't know why, but we don't know is a complete sentence, right? But, to me, that shows more commitment because they're going to take care of themselves so they can show up 100% for the people they're caring for.
Yes, ma'am. And you just spoke about boundaries. So you teach that boundaries aren't selfish; they're sacred.
They are.
How did you personally learn to set them after years of saying yes to everyone?
Oh, that has many layers to it, Christopher. Um, I think that, I just realized how miserable I was and that I was a doormat, you know. Oh, ask Lynette, she'll do it. Give it to Lynette, she'll take care of it, and just yeah, I just thought this is ridiculous. The more I say yes, the more I'm taken advantage of. And if I want to have a life, if I want to live, I got to learn how to say no. And, then starting to look at, am I saying yes because I feel like I have to? Or am I saying yes because I really want to? There's a difference, you know. And not to say that men aren't like this, but I think as women, especially a woman my age, we were conditioned to always say yes and take care of everybody else and please everybody else and be the good mom and the good wife and the good daughter. And, I'm all about, let's squash that good girl mentality because it's killing us,
It is.
And I think that, it happens to men also, I just happen to have more women clients than I do men. So
That makes sense. And I
yeah.
hate to say it this way, but that kind of goes back to what you just said is, the ways of the old ways is men don't speak about their feelings.
Yes.
And in healthcare and EMS and first responders, we're always taught, maybe unofficially, that if you speak about it, you're weak, you're powerless,
Yeah.
and that's
Right.
not what it is. It's
Mm-mm.
quite the opposite. You seek help, you're bettering yourself, you're stronger.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
should be the way it's thought of nowadays instead of how it is in the olden days. We need to change.
Yeah.
We need to change our mentality like we change our electronics.
Exactly. I think we're starting to shift that way, but I think we have a ways to go.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So, what does a healthy boundary look like on a chaotic shift where patients still need you and coworkers still lean on you?
I would say that, if somebody is trying to give you their work on top of it, on top of yours, or asking you to stay longer or things like that, there's ways you can say no and still sound compassionate. Like I could say, Christopher, I'm really honored that you asked me to help you with that, but I really can't right now, maybe another time.
Yeah, kind of like
You know, it's just learning how to reframe what you're saying so that you feel good about saying no and the person receiving it thinks, oh, they're not just saying, well, no,
right.
Yeah.
So, a lot of responders think that boundaries mean letting people down. How do you convince them that boundaries protect the mission?
You got to look at it differently. If you're not saying no, and you're going into a shift where maybe this is you're going on 20 hours and you're exhausted, or any of those scenarios, if you look at it like, if I'm not protecting myself, my space, and my energy, I'm not showing up for them. What if I make a mistake because I'm too tired? What if there's so many different ways to look at it other than, well, I can't say no because that's selfish, and then I'm letting them down. You're actually going to let them down if you don't protect your time, space, and energy, because you can't fully be there. You're
Right.
going to be mentally and physically exhausted both.
Very true. So, what's one boundary you wish every caregiver would set by the end of this week?
Ooh. I would just like them to, you can start small. Doesn't have to be a big boundary, but, pick an hour where this is your time. And unless the house is burning down and someone's dying, don't interrupt me, give me, and a lot of times it's just being honest. I just really need this time for myself. So I'm going to take a half an hour. No phone call, no nothing, you know.
Take your own little mental break.
Yeah, yeah. And if you do that throughout the day, it builds your resilience. I think people think self-care has to be like huge, and it doesn't. You know, it doesn't have to be a whole day off or a whole day away or, you know,
Yes, ma'am. So, how can leaders model boundaries for their teams instead of preaching burnout recovery from the top down?
by honoring what their employees need.
I love that.
Yeah.
So, you've said compassion fatigue isn't a character flaw, it's a physiological response. Explain what's really happening in our bodies when empathy runs dry.
You have no capacity left. You've completely shut down, you know. You've given and given and given until now you're not feeling, you're not thinking, you're not even there, you know. You're completely depleted.
Yes, ma'am, you're drained, and
Yeah.
it doesn't help nobody.
Mm-mm.
So, how can caregivers start repairing their nervous systems after years of chronic stress?
Starting to take little moments for themselves. There's all kinds of things they can do. They can, even if it's just step outside for 10 minutes, you know, go for a walk, you know. Walking helps everything physically and mentally, lowers cortisol, all, you know, all of that. Box breathing is another one. That helps to regulate your nervous system. But just starting with little tiny things and then thinking about, what did I used to like to do? What did I used to enjoy? What made me happy? What gave me energy? What calmed me down? You know, because your life might not look like that ever again, but you can have pieces of it back. And I think a lot of times we think it's just completely gone. I'll never be able to do that. I'll never be able to have that. But you can have little pieces of those things, you know, and just to, you know, start to remember, you know, did you like to read? Simple things like that, that people just kind of overlook, you know?
Pretty much reground yourself.
Yeah.
So, you teach grounding tools as well. Can you walk us through a 5-minute reset any responder could do in their rig or at the nurse's station?
Box breathing is a great one. You know, what you do is close your eyes, take a deep breath, and your eyes are gonna follow a box, and you're gonna breathe in, hold, breathe out across the top. Breathe in, down the bottom, hold, breathe out across the bottom. So you're just breathing a box, and it just helps calm you down, ground you, um, bring you back to yourself, to your body. I think a lot of times, as you know, caregivers are respond, you're in your head all the time. You have
Very true.
all this stuff going in your mind nonstop. Sometimes we're not even aware of it, you know, but it's going 24/7. And that's one way to bring yourself back and ground yourself, you know.
I love it. And that's, like you said, that's easy to do and quick.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, you emphasize community in recovery. What's the danger of trying to heal alone?
Mm. Because we're not meant to be alone. We just aren't. We need support. We need people who understand what we go through on a daily basis. We need people to support us. We don't need a group of people who are going to bitch and complain. You know, we need people who are going to be positive and, you know, remind us of who we are and what we can do, and that we're not stuck here forever. And, you know, so having that support, that outside support, whether it's friends, a support group, you know, other people that you work with, just knowing that you're not alone and that people get it and are there for you makes a huge difference.
Having a true support system.
Yeah.
I think that's, personally, it took me years to learn that. And it's still hard to this day in a way. I actually, recent, within the past few years, I've made some friends that are a very good support system. And it seems weird in a way that they are as supportive as they are, but it's nice to know they're there because I've never had it like that before. I
Yeah.
think that's what a lot of people need to realize is
Yes.
we do meet a lot of acquaintances, we do have a lot of friends, but there's only a very select few that are willing to help us out in our time of needs.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep, for sure. I still struggle with that sometimes too, because I'm so conditioned to doing everything myself and never asking for any help, you know. And I know when I'm doing it because I start to get defeated, tired, and I'm thinking, what am I? And that's the other thing too is, when you start to feel that way, ask yourself what you quit doing. What was working
Right.
before that you're not doing anymore? That's the quickest way to get back into balance.
So earlier you talked about finding your joy again after burnout. What does that process actually look like for you? Messy truth and all.
How did I do it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I it's kind of crazy. At my lowest moment, I up and moved everybody out into the middle of the country because I loved horses, and that was my therapy. And I started a nonprofit horse ranch where I rescued, retrained, and used all the horses in non-traditional therapy. And everybody thought, oh, she's doing such a great thing. But what they don't know is it was for me. It was my therapy. It was my way to get grounded and get myself back because it was during the worst time, I think, in my life. And that was in 2004. The ranch is still going strong and still out there. I don't train horses anymore, but I'm still involved. And yeah, it's a great organization.
That is
Yeah,
awesome. And animals are a great stress reliever for everybody.
they are.
It's amazing
Absolutely.
to see how much
Yeah,
dopamine response we have in our systems from animals.
yeah. So I know what I did was kind of radical, but you don't have to do it that way. It's really just trying to go back and journal, write down, what did I used to do that made me happy? And I think that we connect to things faster when we write it out and write it down.
Very true. So, how do you help Sorry, how do you help caregivers rediscover themselves outside the badge, the scrubs, and the stethoscope?
That right there. We start with journaling, Um, any caregiver in my course, there's three things I have to do every morning. They have to start out with gratitude work, even if it's just one thing, even if it's just simple, like I'm grateful I have this pillow. Because I think a lot of time, I've actually had several people say to me, well, how can I be grateful for anything if I'm not happy? And I think it's the opposite. I think that when you start to be grateful for the things that you have, it brings happiness. And so I ask them to start with gratitude work in the morning before they hop out of bed, look at their phone, and, in that, fight or flight mode right away when their feet hit the ground, right? I want to break that pattern. So gratitude work, and then set an intention. What do I want to do today? How do I want to feel? You know, and actually put it out there into the universe or to God or whatever you believe. And then decide what's the most important thing for me to do today.
It sounds like that
And
goes side by side as well. Is if you have gratitude, you can, start
yeah,
plans and set it
yeah,
in motion. And like you said, I've had a lot of guests over the past weeks, and the one common denominator has been faith. And it doesn't matter what your faith is in. It doesn't
no,
matter if you believe in God, Buddha, just a higher
mhm,
power. Period is such an emotional response to yourself, and
yeah,
it can help create better gratitude in the end as well.
absolutely, absolutely, yeah. And then, the next thing I have them do is start to journal. Remember who you were. What did you like? And I think that when you're in burnout and you're in these types of situations, I think you take a huge hit to your self worth also, because you're trying to give 100% and you set these unrealistic expectations on yourself that can't possibly be met. And then it eats away at your self worth. And so that's the other thing is, journal. What did you accomplish? What have you done well in your life? What are you proud of? It starts to, you start to connect to who you used to be then. And then, writing down things that you like to do, enjoy, talk, people you used to talk to that maybe you don't talk to anymore, things like that. And then I think that you have to really connect it to a why. Why do I need to do this? Why do I need to make these changes? And, there's no right or wrong reason, or, a why is a why. What's important to you? Why do I have to change these patterns? And because everybody's motivated, right, in the beginning, and we lose the motivation, but that why will connect you back to why and get you maybe motivated again.
And I love how you said the journaling it falls back to a bunch of training that, we all get, is if it's never written, it never happened.
Yeah.
So if you don't write it down, you probably won't remember it.
Right.
And
yeah.
I've actually had these talks with my daughters in the past few weeks. Is journaling actually is a very helpful tool that all of us can do, and it doesn't matter if it's electronic, it don't matter if it's writing, it doesn't matter if it's digital. However you do it, do it.
Yep.
So for someone listening who feels too far gone, what's the first small act of healing you'd tell them to try tonight?
Talk to somebody. Let somebody in. Don't pretend that you have to be the strong one 24/7. It's okay to ask for help. I think we think it's not. I think we think if we ask for help, we're failing, but it's not. It's not failing. Asking for help, talking to somebody, and, recognizing maybe I can't do this on my own.
Yeah. And you can't help yourself until you reach out for help.
Right.
Again, I've learned that the hard way myself. So, and you say recovery isn't about perfection, it's about permission. What does giving yourself permission sound like in real life?
Well, I think for me, permission to rest, permission to ask for help, giving myself permission to, not do things that drain me. I don't have to do everything all the time, little things like that I think we just automatically do, that we don't really have to.
Yeah.
We just think we do.
I want to chime in on that as well. As something that a psychologist told me is get permission to forgive yourself, forgive others. That's one of the biggest ones, again, that we all beat ourselves up of. It is we all beat ourselves up about something that we haven't forgave ourselves for someone else that hasn't been forgiven. And that's what I think, in my opinion, that should be a permission that you should be able to give yourself and give others, and start the recovery process of, it's permission of, I need this, I need to do this, I need to get over it, done.
Yeah.
And it is a hard road to start, it is a hard road to finish, but at the same time, all of us need to do it.
Yeah.
And so what is the most unexpected thing you learned about yourself while healing?
That I was a control freak and it was doing me no good. Yep. That was a hard one for me. I used to say, I'm not a control freak, but I was. I thought if I controlled every little thing, I was protecting myself, my family, my life, situations. I just wrote about that this morning. It's funny that you asked that. But yes, total control freak. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think, again, once we do our self-diagnosis and the journaling, and, we start to realize ourselves, we have different characteristics that we don't know we have. Like you said, control freak for you, it was for me, it was a lot of self-doubt that I didn't realize I had. I was in the phase of thinking I wasn't good enough, and everyone told me a lot of times, my managers, supervisors, I was, but I didn't feel it. And I think it never hit me until I started actually writing it down and making it make sense.
Yeah, we're good at ignoring it and burying it, and
Very true. And as you said, just like on an airplane, you can't take care of anyone else till you take care of yourself.
Right. Yep.
So that was actually my final question. That was Lynette Weldon, educator and living proof that burnout isn't the end of the story. Lynette, where can people find you or connect with your work?
You can find me at LynetteWeldon.com. I'm on Facebook under Lynette Weldon and Coaching with Lynette. I just started a YouTube channel. I'm back on TikTok. I was banned. I was banned on TikTok, I think because I just speak the truth and they didn't like it. I don't know. But I'm back. So you can find me on TikTok
That's
too.
awesome. I've
Yeah.
never seen like a ban for
I'm like,
teenagers.
I'm 61. You're banning me? What?
I
For
just started to
telling.
use this.
Yeah. So that's where they can find me.
I gotcha. And that's beautifully, your story is beautifully said. So before we close, what's the one message you want to leave every listener with today?
Oh, so many. I want people to understand that they are just as worthy as the compassion that they give everybody else. They deserve it. They're just as worthy of it. You know, I want everybody just to really love themselves as much as they love everyone else.
I love that, and I couldn't agree more. If you think it's too heavy to say it anyway. It beats a eulogy. You don't have to apologize for surviving however you can. You're not the reason things are heavy. You're the reason they're still moving. Need support right now? Reach out to me. Reach out to somebody. Text or call 988 or visit 988lifeline.org. You're not alone. Not in this job. Not in this fight. Want to share your story or connect? Visit critical-run.com or message the Facebook page, Dispatched and Dysfunctional. We're building this for you, for them, for all of us.